Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, all things adjacent. And we're gonna get a little bit political today. I know. Trust me, we're gonna stay mostly to climate change, but real quick, just a headline right after I finished my video yesterday. As it always happens, as soon as I finish a video, I see something, I'm like, oh, I needed to talk about that. Anyways, so big news, everybody has heard about this. Trump has made a decision to pull all the troops from Syria. This article from the Washington Post is titled, "Trump's abrupt decision to pull American troops from Syria is riskier than it looks." Of course it is, because the Washington Post is part of the apparatus that wants to keep all the war games going, and also part of the apparatus that, you know, wants to basically down Trump. It doesn't matter what he does, even if it's, you know, this is actually really positive. This is actually great. I'm not going to talk too long about this, but really quickly, you know, not long after Trump was elected, he was like, I'm going to pull all the troops from Syria. And then like 2 days later, there was a gas attack, a chemical gas attack. And everybody was like, oh, you can't do that. Of course not. You know, it's horrible what Assad is doing. And so, you know, there were some military strikes and, you know, okay, we're tough, you know, we're over there being tough. And then he announced again, I think it was earlier this year, going to pull the troops from Syria. Oh, hey, there's another gas attack like 2 days later. You know, how convenient. Of course, you know, he had to denounce this, blah, blah, blah. Again, there's a lot of like conflicting stories on what was going on in Syria. A lot of people are of the mind that ISIS is our creation. And in the Q/conspiracy/ alternative news world, we did create ISIS. We basically funded them and supplied them. And this all ties into John McCain. Apparently John McCain was a go-between for selling arms to ISIS and other, you know, rebels in the area. Apparently, you know, allegedly, this is what happened. There have been, I've seen a few pictures of like al-Nusra or Al-Qaeda, you know, driving around American Jeeps that were, you know, there's been cases where American aid, military hardware, et cetera, was shipped over there, you know, to help people that were, you know, we backed, and it fell into the wrong hands. Oh, how did that happen? Oh gosh, oh golly. Anyways, blah, 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 long story short, you know, apparently according to, you know, Trump, I guess, we've defeated ISIS. If we created ISIS, I don't know how we defeat ISIS. You know, you just stop funding them and you stop talking about them as they're the big, you know, bad boogeyman. I haven't heard ISIS, the word ISIS, like said, you know, I've heard it said a few times in the last couple of years. Why? Because it's not a thing anymore. ISIS isn't a thing anymore. They're not even when they had the gas attacks, they weren't like, ISIS did this. No, they, you know, they blamed it on Assad, they blamed it on all kinds of other people, but they rarely ever use the word ISIS anymore. Why? Because they don't need to. They have other boogeymen to scare everybody with now. Anyways, whatever. This is good news, okay? This doesn't mean that Trump is a great guy and he's like, you know, all right, go, you know, Trump. But on this particular case, yes, this is awesome news. I'm going to be happy about this, as I was happy about peace talks between North and South Korea, as I was happy about peace talks with Russia, or diplomatic inroads with Russia. I'm not really going to read this article because it's, you know, I don't know if I really need to. It's mainly, you know, it's mainly propaganda, basically saying like, oh, we have to stay there. We have to keep finding a reason to have the military there and to supply them with, you know, to keep the military industrial complex going. That's the reason why, you know, we need to be in Syria. There are other reasons as well. I could talk at length about this. I'm not going to. I'm going to move on to the next thing. But it is a good thing. Less war is good. Here's another thing that I'm going to say about Trump. This doesn't mean I'm a Trump fan. This doesn't mean I'm like, yay, go Trump. Like, yeah, because he's killing the planet and he's doing, you know, other goofy bullshit things. He's, you know, he's pumping up the economy on, you know, hot air, and it looks like it's about to pop that bubble. But this is what I have to say. If I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken, but we haven't started any wars under Trump. We haven't gone somewhere else and like, okay, here we go. There's been talk about the expanded influence of the US forces in Africa, and that is true. There's a lot more going on there. None of it official. But I just haven't seen, you know, even for all the saber rattling that he does, we haven't started any wars yet under Trump. Yet being the operative word. But, you know, if we're going to end a war before we even start another one, that's pretty cool. Let's just hope that continues. I'm going to move on to this article from Counterpunch. Russophobia and the Specter of War. Could global warming pose the greatest threat to the future of life on the planet? Quite possibly. If we believe the international and scientific consensus, despite a widening stratum of debunkers, deniers, and skeptics, what about the prospects of thermonuclear war between the United States and Russia, two countries armed to the max and seemingly moving toward the brink of military conflict? Where does that rate? If the question is asked of most any Beltway denizen, the response might be something along the lines of, sounds frightening, but right now we have other priorities and we can't lose sight of the Russian threat. As American political life continues to deteriorate, matters of war and peace rarely merit attention amidst the sound and fury of manufactured news, moral posturing, personal scandals, and tweeting exchanges. Good for TV ratings and maybe partisan advantage, decidedly less so for addressing issues of political relevance. Now we have 2 years of frenzied Russiagate and its attendant neo-McCarthyism, that the intensifying hostility directed by one nuclear power toward another might bring the world closer to a war that could end all wars seems bizarrely remote to a political class obsessed with little beyond its own power and wealth. Faintly camouflaged by identity politics, the unthinkable remains, well, unthinkable. As anti-Russia hysteria spreads, speech taboos harden. Any discourse at odds with tightening official political media consensus brings immediate blowback. Smear-mongering, that's a good word, and where possible, silencing. It is so obvious that Vladimir Putin is a ruthless, aggressive monster that any dissenting view must be the product of either insanity or Russian propaganda. Ooh, this is good. In this one-dimensional world, the recent appearance of Stephen F. Cohen's important book, War with Russia, comes with special urgency, Cohen being one of the few public intellectuals to challenge the onslaught of Russophobic narratives churned out relentlessly by the political media establishment, and he remains virtually alone and going so far as to write about the very real specter of nuclear catastrophe. I'm going to pause right there and just say, yes, it's just become accepted that, you know, the Russians are doing everything, meddling in everything, and everything. Any crazed opinion or conspiracy or thought, you know, outside of the norm is because Russian bots are telling people, giving people misinformation, because apparently people can't think for themselves. Apparently people can't get ideas for themselves about things. Apparently it's all Russia's fault that, you know, we are unhappy with our situation, you know, unhappy with our choices. Anyways. Cohen being one of the few, yeah, I've read that. Long-term scholar of Soviet-Russian studies, Cohen has for years resisted the tide of mindless Russia bashing that gathered steam first with the 2014 Ukraine events and then with Trump's unacceptable rise to the White House. For his informed and dispassionate analysis of Russian history and politics, Cohen has been denounced as Putin's #1 American apologist, charged by some for having been duped by that great Russian mastermind. Apparently recently on CNN with Anderson Cooper and the neocon warmonger Max Boot, Cohen's stubborn refusal to see Putin as the worst of all tyrannical evils triggered Boot, who proceeded to attack Cohen for decades of apologetics, followed by a dire warning: Russia is attacking us right now. Such is the state of American media discourse that Boot had no need to furnish evidence of any such attack, and Cooper was not about to demand it. Cohen's book, anyways, I don't think I'm going to read this whole thing. I'm going to link this article below. But interesting stuff. I'm going to read the rest of it. It's longer than I thought it was. But I hope you enjoy it. What else did I want to say? A few years ago, there was a videotape that surfaced of, Putin has his own, official motorcades and his, drivers that are his Secret Service and drivers that are close to him. And a few years ago, there was it was a videotaped, but one of his drivers was driving one of his like Mercedes limos, and somebody, this was in Moscow, like went over the divider line of a highway and smashed head on into him and killed him. And a lot of people thought this was an assassination attempt on Putin. He was not in the car at the time. I wonder who could have been behind that. Very curious. Oh, could it be us? Could we be meddling in Russian affairs? Could we be, foisting assassination attempts on Putin? Probably because he deserves it, I'm sure. Because, he's evil and he needs to be taken out. And for the better, for the sake of the world, the safety of the world is at stake. So let's try and kill other leaders of countries and then accuse them of meddling in our elections, that we have plenty of responsibility in destroying ourselves. I'm going to move on. One moment. I know this video's had a lot of political talk already, and I apologize. No, I don't apologize, but I just wanted to talk about that. So moving on to climate change news. This is from First Post. American souvenir hunters causing a silent extinction of giraffes in Africa. It's time the U.S. put the animal on the endangered list. This is from December 17th, 2018. In 1990, I went to the dreadful Kolkata Zoo. They had imported a young female giraffe from Africa, a practice we need to ban. She was utterly beautiful with her shy, long-lashed eyes and graceful ballet legs. I named her Tista, after the mysterious and spectacular river. The Kolkata Zoo officials and the minister promised that they were going to relocate the zoo to a larger area where the animals would roam freely. 40 years and at least 4,000 deaths later, I'm still waiting. Tista is dead. The Kolkata Zoo decided to relocate the giraffes to Odisha's Nandankanan Zoo. They loaded them into the open truck, and while they were swerving, the animals hit their heads on an electric pole and died. Oh, Jesus. While the world concentrates on lions, gorillas, and elephants being decimated, the giraffe is almost extinct. In the last 15 years, the population of giraffes has fallen by 40%. Now there are less than 80,000 left, and they reduce every day. Soon there will only be seen in zoos, and then it's over. The main culprits in this case are the Americans. Conservation groups like Center for Biological Diversity, Humane Society International, Humane Society of the United States, International Fund for Animal Welfare, and Natural Resources Defense Council have been petitioning the government since the last 2 years to protect giraffes under the Endangered Species Act. No action has been taken. What difference will it make to giraffes in Africa if America passes the act? because giraffes are losing their lives to tribal hunting and to souvenir hunters in America who kill through FedEx. One giraffe is killed for a carving to be made on its bone. On average, the U.S. imports about one giraffe hunting trophy a day, and the country has imported 21,402 bone carvings, 3,008 skin pieces, and 3,744 miscellaneous hunting trophies from giraffes over the last few years. Giraffe bones are now the new ivory, and the USA is heavily implicated in the trade with its large market for giraffe parts. Once China gets into it as well, giraffes will be gone in 6 months. Africa now has fewer giraffes than elephants. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature elevated the threat levels to giraffes from least concern to vulnerable on its red list of threatened species in 2016. Giraffes are the tallest mammals on Earth. Their legs alone are taller than many humans. They can run 35 miles an hour, but who can run fast enough to dodge a hunter's bullet? In the war-torn areas of northern Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, and South Sudan, the giraffe is seen as a large animal whose meat can feed a large number of people. Back to the hunter-gatherer scenario of taking out all possible forms of food. Out of 9 subspecies, fewer than 300 West African giraffes survive in Niger. The giraffe is dispersed over 21 countries in state-owned national parks and private and communal lands. Out of 9 subspecies, fewer than 300 West African giraffes survive in Niger, and less than 700 Rothschild's giraffes are dispersed between Uganda and Kenya, according to a report by wildlife experts at Elephant Without Borders. Kenya is down from 30,000 mammals in the 1990s to 5,500 today. The statistics of their survival now go from a species increasing in southern Africa over the last 3 decades to decreasing by 95% in East Africa. The success in keeping giraffe numbers high in southern Africa has much to do with the management of the wildlife areas. The giraffe is part of the bushmeat. Oh, here we go. In Tanzania, the belief is that consuming giraffe brains and bone marrow could be a cure for HIV. There you go. Just like all the other weird beliefs about animal parts, doing great things for you, like as in China. The giraffe is part of the bushmeat in a number of rural African communities. Their skin is used for clothing, shoes, bags, belts, hats, and covers for drums. The hair makes jewelry. Their hair makes jewelry. Thread for sewing or stringing beads. Their tails are used to swish flies away and were originally symbols of authority. Many African governments have restrictions on hunting, banned hunting in national parks, and some have introduced a licensing system, but people continue to hunt wildlife illegally. And American tourists pay local poachers to do the hunting and then send their parts through couriers. Like the Minnesota dentist who had Cecil, the iconic and protected lion in Zimbabwe, killed in 2015 and had the head shipped to him. The U.S. is the largest importer of trophies in the world. Okay. Yeah, this has got to stop. There's often talk in the comment section of like retribution or vengeance on those who perpetuate the destruction of the environment, those who knowingly. This is like, I think this is an easy one right here, like poachers or people who are part of illegal animal trade. Like, there should be some kind of really draconian, really super draconian punishment for that, right? Like if you illegally poach an animal, it should be like death. Poachers should be shot on sight, right? Like, oh, if we catch you, you might stand trial, but we're actually just going to shoot you first and hope, maybe you'll die, maybe you won't. Like that I totally am a proponent of. Like, shoot on sight poachers, of any kind anywhere. I know it sucks. I know that also animals are part of traditional, you know, meals and traditional rituals, et cetera, in some parts of the world. But I mean, if you know a place is a protected area, you know, there just should be, look, this is a protected area. Don't come in here. Don't kill the animals. We're going to shoot you. That should just be like a simple rule. And I bet you poaching would go way down really fast if it was just like shoot to kill. Sorry. We're just not going to allow this. And then, you know, that brings in the question of like, well, what about fish? What about fishermen? What about whalers? What about all the other destruction we're doing on the planet? I mean, you got to hold those people accountable too. I saw this billboard today of like low mercury tuna, right? It was like the lowest mercury tuna. It was like bizarre. Our tuna doesn't have any mercury in it. Buy this tuna, you know, it's good for you. And I was just like, that's disgusting. I go never buy that tuna because it's, you know, where do they have to go to find tuna that doesn't have mercury in it? And why would you want to kill, you know, we're going to kill all the last fish that don't have any mercury in it. The last tuna, right? Leave them alone. Leave the fish in the ocean. Stop eating fish. Stop it. You don't need it. You don't need fish unless you're like living off the ocean, unless you're like in a third world country where you need this fish to survive. It's part of your daily life. It's part of your, you know, it's just part of your food staple. You don't need fish. Just leave the fish alone. Let them go. Let them be. Let them live. Like just stop it. And that could go for meat too, actually. Highly suggest being vegetarian if you aren't already. I'm not going to shame you if you're not, but you know, seriously, it's messed up. I was talking about the Jains yesterday. Jainism, which is a very interesting sect or religion. And the other interesting about it is a part of their religion, there's a symbol in their religion. One of the main symbols in their religion is the swastika. There's another word for it, obviously, than swastika. But so, you know, if you don't know the story, Hitler, you know, used this ancient symbol of, you know, the circle of life or whatever, infinity or whatever, you know, I'm not totally sure about what it means, but so before I just speak randomly on swastikas, the word swastika is a Sanskrit word meaning it is well-being, good existence, and good luck. In Buddhism, the swastika is a symbol of good fortune, prosperity, abundance, and eternity. It is directly related to the Buddha and can be found carved on statues on the soles of his feet and on his heart. It is said that it contains Buddha's mind. What a horrible thing that somebody took, you know, such a well-intentioned symbol and turned it into like the most disgusting, hated like symbol on the planet. Yeah. Anyways, moving on, going back to Jainism. Jainism, traditionally known as Jain Dharma, is an ancient Indian religion. Followers of Jainism are called Jains, a word derived from the Sanskrit word Jina, victor, and connoting the path of victory and crossing over a life stream of rebirths through an ethical and spiritual life. Jains trace their history throughout a succession of 24 victorious saviors. The main religious premises of Jainism are nonviolence, many-sidedness, non-attachment, and aestheticism. Devout Jains take 5 main vows: ahimsa, nonviolence; satya, truth; asteya, not stealing; brahmacharya, celibacy or chastity, and aparagaha, non-attachment. Sorry if I'm just totally munching those. Has 4 to 5 million followers. Worldwide, or most residing in India. But yeah, nonviolence is one's highest religious duty. And Jain texts such as the Akaranga Sutra and Tattva Sutra state that one must renounce all killing of living beings, whether tiny or large, movable or immovable. Its theology teaches that one must neither kill another living being, nor cause another to kill, nor consent to any killing directly or indirectly. Furthermore, Jainism emphasizes nonviolence against all beings, not only in action, but also in speech and in thought. It states that instead of hate or violence against anyone, all living creatures must help each other. Violence negatively affects and destroys one's soul, particularly when the violence is done with intent, hate, or carelessness, and when one directly causes or consents to the killing of a human being or non-human living being. Well, I guess that wipes out shooting poachers on sight. Yeah, can't be a Jain and shoot poachers on sight. Decisions. Anyways, there's a little bit about Jainism there. I'm going to link it below because maybe you're curious. And lastly, I'm going to finish with this. I'm already deep into this video and I didn't think I would be so. I'm going to see if I can read most of this. Oligarchy is destroying our society and the planet. It's from CJ Policronio, December 18th, 2018, from Truthout. Is capitalism on the brink of joining the dustbin of history? And what would a post-capitalist society and a sustainable economy look like? Since the onset of the Industrial Revolution, the world has experienced historically unprecedented levels of growth, with capitalism raising the standard of living in many nations. At the same time, capitalism has generated immense contradictions, exploitation of labor and nature, huge economic inequalities, and gross social injustices. And these traditionally have been the main foci of radical political movements advancing the vision of a just socio-economic order. But it is the era of capitalism growth now coming to an end. Renowned economist James Boyce, senior fellow at the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, offers critical insights on all of these questions, which should be food for thought for all progressives in the age of the revival of democratic socialism. So this is an interview as stated. CJ asks, there are economists today who are arguing that the era of capitalist economic growth is over. Is capitalism, in your own view, on its deathbed, soon to join the dustbin of history like previous economic systems, such as feudalism? James Boyce, your question really has two parts. One is about the future of capitalism. The other is about the future of economic growth. The answers depend on what we mean by both of those terms, capitalism and economic growth. Let me start with growth. Whenever we talk about this, we need to ask, growth of what? Conventional economists use the term to mean growth of GDP, gross domestic product, the monetary value of all goods and services produced in the economy that carry a price tag. Yet we know that GDP is a hodgepodge of things that are good, bad, and useless. It not only includes good things like food and housing and music, but also bad things like the costs resulting from wars, prisons, and environmental disasters. GDP also includes some useless things like one-upmanship spending for what Thorsten Veblen calls conspicuous consumption, the aim of which is merely to attain a higher position in the social pecking order, spending that does not add to a society's well-being, since one person's gain is just another's loss. The only thing that all the items counted in GDP have in common is that they carry a market price tag. At the same time, GDP doesn't count much that is very important to human well-being. It doesn't count good things without a price tag, like the unpaid labor devoted for caring for children and the elderly, or economic service, ecosystem services, or any of the proverbial best things in life that are free. It doesn't account for things that reduce our well-being, like environmental degradation and violence. So all in all, GDP is a deeply flawed measure of society's well-being. Preoccupation with how fast it grows is misplaced. The same applies to limits to growth, a phrase popularized by some well-meaning environmentalists. Of course, there are limits to growth, if by this we mean the growth of bad things like pollution, natural resource depletion, imprisonment, or violence. None of these can grow forever. The limits may be hard to identify with precision. What, for example, is the maximum percent of a nation's population that can be put in jail? 3%, 10, 25? But we know there is a limit. This does not mean that there are limits to growth of all the good things too, things that improve human well-being rather than diminishing it. There are no natural limits to the growth of art or music or knowledge. There are limits on how much food and other necessities we require. These are limits on demand, not necessarily on our ability to supply them. The distinction between good things and bad things wouldn't matter if they were locked together in some fixed and immutable ratio, making it impossible to have more or one of one without more of the other. The good-bad ratio between them is variable, not an unchanging parameter. And a fundamental aim of any economy that works for people on the planet is to move the balance in favor of the good. The limits to growth slogan has obscured this, just as GDP has obscured our understanding of human well-being. It conveys the implication that we face an inexorable trade-off between protecting the environment and advancing economic well-being. Ironically, this is the very same message that is propagated by fossil fuel corporations and diehard opponents of environmental protection. In the end, it's a message that limits the growth of environmentalism itself. And I'm going to leave that right there because I have run out of time in this video and in this evening, and in my brain I have no more energy for putting together thoughts and words coherently. It's time to go to sleep. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Yeah, please hit the like button, the subscribe button. I look forward to reading your comments tomorrow morning when I wake up. That's usually when I check them out. Until next time, peace.